Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the soot-black rafters of a medieval manor just before dawn, where cold stone presses through the soles of your shoes and damp rushes lie scattered across the floor beneath your feet. Smoke from last night's fire hangs lazily above you. Somewhere beyond the oak door, a horse stamps in the frozen yard, its breath rising white into the river mist, while monastery bells drift faintly across the fields. Your boots are already muddy. Your fingers are cold, and a torch sputters beside the doorway as though it, too, would rather remain in bed. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, and although the distant towers and fur-lined cloaks may look wonderfully picturesque from several centuries away, you probably would not last a week out here without discovering muscles you never knew existed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The courtyard is beginning to stir. You stand beneath the covered passage beside the hall as a groom tightens the girth on a dark bay horse. Leather creaks. Buckles knock softly against iron rings. A servant carries a bundle wrapped in waxed cloth toward the gate, and another man lifts a small travelling chest onto a pack horse. Nothing about the departure seems dramatic. There are no trumpets. No banners snapping heroically in the sunrise. Mostly there is mud. Your husband is leaving the manor for several weeks, perhaps longer. No one can quite agree whether his destination should be called important. He may be attending his lord at another estate, settling a dispute over land, travelling to a royal court, inspecting distant property, joining a military retinue, or following a road towards some obligation whose paperwork appears to matter greatly to men wearing expensive belts. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. He rides away. You watch him pass beneath the timber gatehouse while frost glitters along the ruts of the road. 2 mounted attendants follow him, then a pack horse, then the dog that has apparently decided this expedition belongs to him as well. A servant runs after the dog. The dog ignores him. For a few moments, hoofbeats remain audible beyond the wall. Then they soften beneath the winter wind. The gate closes with a heavy wooden thud, and suddenly the manor feels larger. Not emptier exactly. Busier. You turn back toward the hall. Already, people are waiting. A household of this kind never pauses because one person disappears down a muddy road. Fires must be fed. Bread must be baked. Horses require fodder. Chickens must be released from their nighttime enclosure. Servants expect instructions. Tenants may arrive with questions. A leaking roof remains stubbornly uninterested in whether the master is home. And so the rhythm continues. You walk beneath the doorway into the main hall, where a servant is raking yesterday's rushes away from the hearth. The rushes covering medieval floors are not merely decorative. Fresh ones help soften cold stone and absorb the endless little spills of household life. Although old rushes can become a rather impressive collection of crumbs, dust, fleas, bones, and things best left unidentified before bedtime. Near the hearth, an elderly maid shakes out a wool blanket. At a trestle table, a clerk bends over a sheet of parchment, rubbing sleep from his eyes with an ink-stained finger. He has several messages waiting for your attention, though mercifully he does not attempt to deliver all of them at once. You warm your hands over the embers. The first responsibility is simply knowing what has changed. Who is sick? Which servant failed to appear? Has the miller delivered flour? Did the south pasture fence survive yesterday's wind? Has the brewer begun the next batch of ale? Is there enough firewood stacked beneath the lean-to? A medieval household depends upon dozens of small answers, and during your husband's absence, more of those answers now travel toward you. This does not mean every medieval woman suddenly becomes sovereign of everything around her. Rank, region, wealth, local law, custom, and family arrangements all matter. A noble woman managing a large estate lives very differently from a peasant wife tending a narrow strip of land, and a wealthy widow may possess freedoms that a young married woman does not. Still, husbands leave. They travel for trade, war, court business, pilgrimage, lawsuits, seasonal labour, and service to greater lords. Life cannot politely wait outside the gate until they return. So women act. You cross toward a small chamber adjoining the hall. A heavy iron key hangs from a cord at your waist. Another rests inside a wooden box. Keys carry an unmistakable meaning in medieval households. They open storerooms, chests, cupboards, and doors. But they also symbolize responsibility. A woman entrusted with household keys is trusted with goods that must last through winter, and with supplies that may represent months of labor. You do not begin opening everything yet. That comes later. For now, you merely check that the keys are where they should be. One is missing. You stare at the empty hook. A maid quietly points toward the table. There it lies beneath a folded cloth. Your reign has survived its first crisis. Outside, a rooster announces this achievement with unnecessary enthusiasm. You step back into the courtyard as pale sunlight reaches the upper stones of the wall. A stable boy leads a grey mare toward the trough. Two geese wander past as though conducting their own inspection of the estate. Near the kitchen door, someone carries a wicker basket of onions toward the cook. Beyond the wall stretch fields silvered with frost. Those fields matter. So do the sheep grazing farther down the slope, the cattle sheltered behind a timber fence, the grain remaining in storage, the hens scratching near the barn, and the pigs whose enthusiasm for escaping exceeds their understanding of what freedom actually involves. The manor is not merely a residence. It is an organism made from people, animals, buildings, food, fuel, obligations, habits, debts, prayers, and seasons. And now you help keep it breathing. A woman approaches from the gate carrying a small basket beneath her cloak. She's the wife of a tenant farmer, and she has come because her family owes several days of labour on the manor land. Her husband has injured his ankle. She explains through the steward and cannot work today. You listen. This is the beginning of something that will repeat again and again while your own husband is away. People bring problems. Some are genuine. Some are exaggerated. Some swear that a household can judge honesty by watching whether a person touches their nose while speaking. Others claim that crossing your fingers behind your back prevents a liar's words from harming you. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone truly believes such tricks or simply enjoys having something mysterious to blame when negotiations go badly. You grant the tenant's family a little time. Not generosity without limit. Not cruelty for the pleasure of it. Simply a practical decision. The steward nods. Another matter waits behind it. Then another. By mid-morning, the frost begins to soften into brown mud. The bells of the distant monastery sound then, marking the hour more reliably than any clock you own. A pot of pottage thickens over the kitchen fire. Coarse bread rests beneath a linen cloth. Somewhere a carpenter strikes a wooden peg into place with slow, regular blows. You pause beneath the hall doorway and look once toward the road where the riders vanished. Your husband is somewhere beyond the bare trees now. Yet nothing here has stopped. The smoke still climbs. The servants still move. The animals still need feeding. The doors still require locking. And as another bell rolls softly across the winter fields, you begin to understand that absence does not create stillness. It creates work. The work begins with the door that does not wish to open. You stand in a narrow passage behind the hall, one hand wrapped around a cold iron key while the other presses against an oak storeroom door swollen by winter damp. The lock turns grudgingly. The hinges complain. You lean your shoulder into the timber, and at last the door gives way with the sort of groan usually reserved for elderly monks asked to climb stairs before breakfast. Inside, the air smells of grain dust, dried herbs, smoke, old wood, and the faint sweetness of saples stored beyond their best days. This room matters almost as much as the great hall. Perhaps more. A household can survive without polished silver or embroidered cushions. It cannot survive very long without flour, salt, candles, ale, firewood, linen, dried peas, smoked meat, and enough grain to carry everyone through the months when nothing useful grows outside. You lift a beeswax candle and step carefully between sacks. The key at your waist taps against another key as you walk. There are several of them now. One opens this storeroom, another belongs to a chest holding better linen, a smaller one fits the cupboard where spices and more valuable household goods are kept. Another opens a coffer containing coins, documents, and objects that everyone insists are safely stored but still asks about 3 times a day. Keys are practical things, but they are also signs. In many medieval households, the person carrying them is the person expected to know what remains, what has been used, what must be replaced, and who has been helping themselves rather too enthusiastically. You stop beside a grain bin. The lid is heavy. When you raise it, pale kernels lie beneath like a dry little sea. A servant measures the level with a wooden rod. You compare it with the last tally. Enough for now. Probably. No one can quite agree whether household stores ever seem sufficient once winter has properly begun. A sack that looks reassuringly full on Monday can appear mysteriously half empty by Thursday, especially when there are servants, guests, dogs, poultry, and one cook who considers every request for smaller portions a personal insult. You move on. Near the wall hang strings of onions and garlic, bundles of sage, rue, fennel, and other herbs dry from wooden pegs. Some are meant for cooking, some are kept for remedies, some have uses that hover somewhere between medicine and superstition. A small bunch of dried rowan twigs has been tied above one doorway. The maid beside you says little about it. Some swear that rowan keeps harmful spirits from entering a household. Others prefer iron, salt, holy water, or a saint's medal tucked somewhere discreetly near a threshold. Whether everyone believes these protections is difficult to know. Medieval people are often practical enough to use prayer, herbs, locks, and superstition all at once. There is no reason, after all, to leave a door spiritually protected but physically unlocked. You continue deeper into the storeroom. Barrels stand along one wall. I'll occupy several of them. Ale is not merely a festive drink here. In many households it is ordinary nourishment, brewed in varying strengths and consumed daily. Brewing can be a major part of domestic work, and women frequently take part in making, managing, and sometimes selling it. You tap one barrel lightly. A hollow sound is rarely welcome. The steward makes a note. Another barrel is opened, and the smell rises warm and yeasty from within. Good. Beside it are smaller containers of vinegar and salted goods, A rack holds smoked fish. Strips of preserved meat hang higher in the cooler air, carefully placed where dogs cannot reach them. The dog from the morning expedition has apparently returned. You discover this because his nose appears around the doorway. He looks at the smoked meat. You look at him. He sits down with theatrical innocence. The storeroom door closes shortly afterward. From there you cross to the linen chamber, where household cloth is stacked inside chests and cupboards. Linen is valuable. Sheets, tablecloths, towels, undergarments, cloth for bandages, napkins, and lengths of fabric represent considerable labour. Flax must be grown, processed, spun, woven, washed, bleached, cut, and sewn. Good household textiles are therefore not treated casually. You lift the lid of a chest. The smell of dried lavender escapes from between folded cloths. Lavender, rosemary, southernwood, and other fragrant plants may be placed among linens to keep them smelling pleasant and perhaps discourage insects. Some households also use herbs or aromatic woods inside storage chests. You run your fingers over a folded sheet. A maid counts the pieces. 2 are missing. This sounds alarming until one is found drying near the kitchen, and the other turns out to have been used for a guest who departed 3 days earlier. The missing linen crisis has ended almost as quickly as the missing key crisis. Your administration remains remarkably stable. You move next toward the candle cupboard. Beeswax candles are expensive compared with cheaper tallow lights. They burn more cleanly and smell less like rendered animal fat, which is a quality everyone appreciates once several candles have been burning in a closed room. The best candles are therefore used carefully. You count them. The clerk records the number. A broken candle stub sits beside the others, saved because even a little wax is useful. Nothing is wasted easily here. Candle ends can be melted again. Bones flavour broth. Ash has household uses. Old cloth becomes patches, wrapping, cleaning rags, or bandages. Even stale bread may find another purpose. Waste is something wealthy households can afford more often than poor ones, but even here abundance has limits. Winter teaches limits very effectively. You pass through another doorway into a cooler chamber where apples, dried beans, peas, nuts, and root vegetables are kept. Some have begun to soften. You instruct the kitchen to use those first. The cook will make pottage. Pottage is the dependable heartbeat of much medieval eating grains. Peas, beans, onions, herbs, vegetables, and sometimes meat simmered together in a pot that can feed many people without demanding elegance. It will not impress a visiting count. It will keep a household alive. That is usually more useful. By midday, you return to the hall carrying a short list of what must be watched carefully. Salt, candles, allet, fine flour, smoked fish, linen. The list is not dramatic, but drama is rarely what keeps a manor functioning. A servant brings you coarse bread on a wooden trencher and a bowl of thick pottage. You sit near the hearth while the wet hem of your gown begins to dry. Around you, the household continues its slow movement. A boy carries kindling toward the fire. Someone shakes rain from a cloak near the door. The clerk scratches figures onto parchment. The half-burned candle from morning still rests beside him, its wax leaning crookedly down one side. You notice the keys lying against your gown. They are heavier than they looked when hanging quietly from their hook. Not because iron weighs so much, because everything behind those locked doors now leads back to decisions. Who receives what? How much remains? What must last? What can be spared? What must be guarded until spring? Outside, wind moves along the walls. Inside, Grain stays dry, ale stays sealed, linen stays folded, and candles wait in darkness for the nights ahead. For the moment, that is enough. By the time you finish your pottage, the rain has thinned into a pale mist, and the courtyard beyond the hall door shines darkly beneath a weak winter sky. The keys remain at your waist. The half-burned candle still leans beside the clerk, and outside, beyond the walls where the grain stays dry and the linen stays folded, the land itself is waiting. You pull on a wool cloak lined at the collar with worn fur and step into the yard. Wet air touches your face immediately. A groom leads the grey mare past you, and somewhere near the barn the same wandering dog from yesterday appears again, damp, muddy, and entirely convinced that estate management requires his personal supervision. You follow the steward through the gate. The road becomes mud almost at once. Not decorative mud, not the charming sort painted beneath the hooves of saints in manuscripts. This is thick, brown, boot-pulling mud that collects around your soles and makes each step feel slightly negotiated. A narrow track leads between strips of cultivated land. Winter fields lie mostly quiet now, their furrows dark beneath the mist. But quiet does not mean unimportant. The next season is already being prepared in small ways. Seed must be saved. Ditches must remain clear. Fences must stand. Animals must be kept from wandering into planted ground. Tenants must know which strips they owe labour upon and when. The steward carries a wax tablet and a short staff. You carry questions. Near the first field, 2 men are repairing a hurdle fence woven from flexible branches. One section has collapsed during the night, probably under the weight of wind and an animal with more determination than wisdom. A cow stands nearby chewing peacefully. No one can prove anything. You inspect the break. Fences matter because medieval fields are not always divided by neat stone walls. Hedges, ditches, wooden hurdles, banks, and customary boundaries often mark where one person's rights begin and another's end. A loose animal can trample crops, damage gardens, or create disputes that last longer than the fence itself. You instruct the men to strengthen the post before evening. The cow watches without remorse. Farther down the slope, sheep gather close together in a damp pasture. Their wool is heavy with mist. A shepherd raises a hand as you approach and explains that one ewe has begun limping. You crouch near the animal while he checks the hoof. People here know livestock closely because animals are wealth in a very literal form. Sheep provide wool, cattle pull, graze, breed, and supply hides and meat. Pigs turn woodland forage into food with astonishing efficiency. Chickens offer eggs, while contributing absolutely nothing to household discipline. The shepherd packs a little crushed herb around the sore place. Whether it helps is uncertain. Some swear that sheep recover better if a sprig of rowan is kept near the fold, especially when sickness seems to spread without obvious cause. Others blame damp ground, bad grazing, worms, poor luck, or the evil eye. You suspect mud. Mud is less mysterious but extremely persuasive. You continue toward the tenant strips. Here the steward explains who owes labour on the domain land, the portion worked for the manor itself. Obligations vary. One household may owe ploughing, another may owe harvest work. Someone else must carry hay, repair a ditch, cart timber, or provide hens at a customary season. These arrangements are often governed by habit as much as written rule. Custom has tremendous weight. A practice repeated for generations can become nearly as solid as stone, even if no one remembers exactly why it began. At the edge of a field, an older tenant waits beside a broken plough beam. He removes his cap when you approach. The wood split the previous afternoon. Without repair, he cannot prepare a small patch of ground he intends to work when weather permits. The manor carpenter can mend it, but wood and labour have value. You listen while the steward explains what is owed and what can reasonably be exchanged. The conversation is calm. You agree that the repair may be made, with the tenant contributing 2 days of work later in the season. Nothing dramatic happens. No trumpet sounds. No chronicler rushes over to record your decision. Yet this is how estates continue. One small agreement prevents one small failure from becoming another. You walk on. The mist lifts enough for the distant monastery tower to appear beyond a line of leafless trees. A bell sounds, faint but clear, and the note drifts over fields slick with water. You remember hearing that same bell before dawn. It seems farther away now. Near the lower meadow, a ditch has clogged with leaves and silt. Water spreads shallowly over the grass. 3 labourers are already clearing it with wooden spades. Drainage is unglamorous work, which means it is essential. Too much water can damage hay ground, rot roots, weaken tracks, and make already unpleasant roads nearly impossible. You watch a man lift a heavy clump of black mud. It slides directly back into the ditch. He stares at it. The ditch appears to have won the first exchange. You wisely say nothing. Beyond the meadow lies a small patch of woodland where pigs may sometimes be driven to feed on acorns in season. Rights to woodland resources can matter greatly. People gather fuel, graze animals, cut limited timber, collect nuts, or use common ground according to local custom. And local custom can be argued over with impressive enthusiasm. The steward points toward a boundary oak. Someone has cut several branches recently. Not enough to kill the tree, enough to raise questions. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the tenant responsible believed he had the right to take the wood or merely believed no one would notice. Unfortunately for him, the steward notices everything. You decide the matter can wait until the manor court. There is no need to turn every branch into a crisis. By afternoon, your cloak hem is dark with mud. Your hands are cold despite your gloves. You stop near a small field shelter where workers have lit a modest fire beneath an overhang. Someone offers you coarse bread and a little smoked fish wrapped in cloth. You accept. For a few quiet minutes, you stand near the warmth and eat while damp wool steams gently around you. The dog sits beside the fire. He receives nothing. He looks betrayed by the entire feudal system. You almost laugh. Then the steward unfolds his tablet again. There are still grazing rights to confirm, a damaged gate near the north pasture, and a tenant who insists that his geese have been wrongly accused of entering someone else's barley. You turn back toward the fields. The work stretches outward in every direction, not grand or heroic, but practical, muddy, and continuous. Behind you, the manor walls rise pale through the mist. Ahead, every fence, ditch, animal, strip of earth, and customary obligation seems to whisper the same quiet truth. While your husband rides distant roads, the land does not wait for him either. By the time you return through the manor gate, the daylight has thinned to the colour of old pewter, and the mud on your boots has dried in ridges along the leather. The dog slips in behind you as though he has personally completed the inspection of every field. Inside the hall, the warmth feels almost luxurious. Almost. Smoke still hangs beneath the rafters. Damp cloaks steam near the hearth. A servant has spread fresh rushes across part of the floor, and the smell of green stems mixes with wood smoke, onions, wet wool, and supper beginning somewhere beyond the screen's passage. You remove your cloak. The keys settle against your gown. Then you notice the clerk. He is waiting beside the long table. The same half-burned candle from morning has been replaced by 2 fresh beeswax candles, which is never a promising sign. Beside them lie a wooden counting board, several small piles of coins, strips of parchment, a bundle of tally sticks, and an expression suggesting that numbers have multiplied while you are outside. You sit. This is the less picturesque side of running a medieval household. No frost on fields. No distant monastery tower. Just money, or more accurately several different things that represent money, debt, obligation, promise, and the hope that everyone involved remembers the same version of an agreement. The clerk begins with rents. Some tenants owe coin. Others owe produce or labour. A few have paid part and promised the rest. One payment has arrived as hens. You stare at the notation. Apparently 3 hens now count as progress toward a debt. Medieval accounting has a certain flexibility. The clerk places a tally stick in front of you. It is a narrow piece of wood cut with notches representing an amount owed or received. In some systems, the stick may be split lengthwise so that each party keeps a matching half. The shape of the cut and the arrangement of notches help confirm that the pieces belong together. It is simple. It is clever. And unlike parchment, it does not require beautiful handwriting from a man whose fingers are freezing. You turn the stick over. The steward names the tenant. Payment received. Mark settled. The next entry is less tidy. A miller owes a portion of grain. He claims part was delivered. The storeroom tally suggests otherwise. No one can quite agree whether the missing measure was never sent, counted badly, spilled, eaten by rats, or transformed through some miracle into someone else's supper. The clerk looks toward you. You decide the miller should be asked again before any penalty is imposed. There is little value in creating an enemy over a sack that may yet be sitting behind the wrong door. The next parchment concerns wages. Carpenters have repaired roofing timbers. 2 labourers cleared the ditch you saw that afternoon. A groom needs payment for extra work. A messenger who travelled to a neighbouring estate expects reimbursement for food and lodging. Coins move outward in small streams. You count carefully. Silver pennies are the ordinary basis of many transactions, but larger sums are often recorded through accounting units rather than convenient piles of higher value coins. That means a household can speak of pounds and shillings without necessarily producing tidy modern-looking coins of those exact values from a purse. You learn quickly that counting medieval money is less like opening a purse and more like arguing with fractions by candlelight. A deeply soothing bedtime activity. The clerk scratches another figure onto parchment. His quill squeaks. Outside, wind presses against the shutters. You reach for the cup of ale beside your elbow. It has gone lukewarm. You drink it anyway. Next come market expenses. Salt. Iron fittings. Lamp oil. A small quantity of pepper. 2 lengths of cloth. A replacement cooking pot. And tolls. Market tolls, bridge tolls, gate payments, and customary charges can nibble away at the cost of travel and trade. A merchant bringing goods into a town may pay for entry or stall space. Carts may face charges, animals may be counted, goods may be weighed. One recent journey has produced a list of fees long enough to make the purchase itself seem almost an afterthought. The steward insists the bridge toll was higher than usual. The clerk says the amount matches last winter. You ask whether anyone kept the earlier record. The clerk disappears briefly into a chest. He returns carrying parchment tied with faded cord. Dust rises when he opens it. You sneeze. The dog wakes near the hearth, decides this is not important, and goes back to sleep. After several minutes, the older account confirms the clerk is correct. The steward accepts defeat with admirable dignity, meaning he says nothing at all. You move on. There are debts owed to the manor as well. A neighbouring tenant promised payment for timber. A merchant still owes money for wool purchased months earlier. A minor gentleman borrowed a horse and has somehow allowed the cost of its feed to become your problem. Such obligations matter because wealth is rarely sitting conveniently in one locked chest. It is scattered. Some exists as coin, some as grain, some as livestock, some as land rights, some as promises written on parchment or remembered by witnesses. Some exists only as the expectation that another person will eventually do what they said they would. That last category can be particularly adventurous. A servant brings supper. You eat at the table without leaving the accounts. Thick pottage again, this time with leeks and a little salted meat. Coarse bread serves as a trencher beneath a portion of cheese. The candles burn lower while you work. Across the hall, servants settle into quieter tasks. A woman mends a sleeve. Another spins wool. Someone adds a log to the hearth. The monastery bell sounds in the distance, softened by walls and wind. The account book does not care. You continue. There is one small pouch of coins held aside for alms. Another amount reserved for household purchases. A larger payment may soon be needed for roofing timber. Winter stores still require protection. You remember the smoked fish, the candles, the linen, the grain. Every object behind every locked door is connected to the figures before you. This is what becomes clearer as the evening deepens. Money here is not abstract. A missing penny becomes less salt. A late rent becomes less grain purchase before spring. A poorly judged debt may become a delayed repair. A generous payment may secure loyalty. A harsh one may create resentment that lingers much longer than the parchment record. Some swear that coin should never be counted after midnight because wealth handled under unlucky hours has a habit of slipping away. Others keep a blessed token, a saint's medal, or even a sprig of certain herbs near a chest where valuables are stored. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such customs are believed literally or simply make uncertainty easier to bear. You prefer a sturdy lock, and a clerk who can count. At last, the final tally is checked. The coins return to the coffer. The parchment is rolled and tied. The tally sticks are bundled together. You press the lid down on the chest and turn the iron key. The click sounds small. Final. For tonight, at least. The half-burned candle from morning has finally disappeared completely, leaving only a little wax hardened against its holder. You rise and stretch stiff fingers toward the hearth. Outside, the fields you walked earlier are dark now. The broken plough waits for repair. The clog ditch is probably still draining. The sheep settle beneath the mist. And here, inside the manor, debts, wages, rents, tolls, and promises have been arranged into something almost orderly. Almost. You look once at the locked coffer before turning away. Managing an estate, you are beginning to understand, means keeping track not only of what people possess, but of what everyone owes everyone else. And that may be the more exhausting inventory. The locked coffer remains behind you when morning returns, but the arguments do not. They arrive shortly after the first bell. You wake to a grey sky pressing low over the manor roof and the faint tapping of rain against wooden shutters. The hearth has fallen to embers. Servants move quietly through the hall, lifting benches into place and sweeping aside yesterday's rushes. Somewhere beyond the screen's passage, a pot is already simmering, and the smell of onions drifts through the smoke. Today Several people are waiting outside. Not merchants, not messengers, tenants. The steward meets you near the doorway with a bundle of notes tucked beneath one arm. It is Manor Court day. You pull your wool cloak tighter and cross into a smaller chamber near the hall, where an oak table has been set beneath a narrow window. The room is cold enough that everyone keeps their outer garments on. A clerk sits at one end with parchment, ink, and a freshly trimmed quill. The steward stands nearby. 2 local men who know the customs of the estate have also been summoned. There are no grand wigs, polished benches, or dramatic speeches. Mostly there are wet boots. The first matter concerns a pig. Naturally. A tenant claims his neighbour's pig entered his garden and uprooted several rows of winter vegetables. The neighbour insists the animal was securely penned. The pig is unavailable for questioning. You listen while both men explain. One speaks quickly. The other repeats himself. The clerk scratches notes while rain ticks softly against the window. Manor courts can deal with all sorts of ordinary disputes and obligations, trespassing animals, unpaid rents, broken fences, improper use of common land, inheritance questions, neglected duties, brewing offences, and failures to maintain roads or ditches. They're not always dramatic places of punishment. Often they are simply where local life is untangled. You ask whether anyone saw the pig in the garden. A woman near the wall raises her hand. She did. The neighbour sighs. The pig, it appears, has developed a legal problem. You order compensation in a modest amount and require the pen to be repaired. The matter ends. The pig remains undefeated in spirit. The next case is less amusing. A widow named Agnes has come because a strip of meadow once worked by her husband is now being claimed by his brother. Her husband died the previous winter. She insists she has the right to continue using the land under local custom. The brother believes otherwise. This is where custom becomes important. Rights can vary greatly from place to place. Some widows hold dower lands or other customary interests. Some inherit or control property in particular circumstances. Some face restrictions, local practice, lordship, family arrangements, and written agreements can all matter. The steward produces an older record. The clerk searches for another. You wait while parchment is unfolded. The room fills with the faint smell of ink, damp wool, and cold stone. No one speaks for several moments. Then an entry is found. A similar case from years earlier supports Agnes. You rule that she may continue using the meadow according to the established custom. Her husband's brother does not look pleased, but he bows his head. This matters. Not because you have suddenly overturned the social order. You have not. Your authority exists within rules, expectations, and relationships already surrounding the estate. But while your husband is absent, someone must hear these disputes. Someone must prevent small resentments from becoming larger ones. Someone must remember that a boundary ditch argued over today may become a fight over hay in summer. The third matter concerns the branch cut from the boundary oak. You remember it immediately. The steward does too. The tenant responsible admits taking the wood, but claims that his father always cut dead branches there. The steward says the branch was alive. The tenant says barely. You inspect the piece of wood that has actually been carried into the chamber as evidence. It is inconveniently leafy. The tenant studies the floor. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether people in such disputes are honestly confused by ancient customs or simply become very creative once caught. You impose a small fine. Not enough to ruin him. Enough to make the oak suddenly memorable. Later comes a complaint about geese trespassing in barley. then a missed labour obligation, then a disagreement over access to a path leading toward common pasture. The cases form a slow procession of everyday friction. A hedge is too far east. A ditch is too shallow. A cow was driven across the wrong strip. A cart blocked a lane. One tenant claims another has been taking more fallen timber from the woods than permitted. Nothing sounds important in isolation. Together, these things shape whether village life runs smoothly. By midday, a servant brings coarse bread, cheese, and ale into the chamber. You eat without leaving your seat. The dog appears beneath the table. No one invited him. He rests his chin on your knee with the solemn expression of a creature deeply interested in medieval jurisprudence. You give him nothing. Justice must remain impartial. After the meal, an older woman enters carrying a small iron key. Her dispute concerns a chest left by her deceased sister. Two relatives claim its contents. The key itself has become part of the argument. Some swear that when a household object passes from the dead, it should be touched with iron before being opened, lest lingering misfortune follow the new owner. Others sprinkle holy water or make the sign of the cross over inherited goods. The clerk looks unimpressed by the superstition. You are more interested in witnesses. Two neighbours remember the sister naming the intended recipient. Their accounts agree. You decide accordingly. The little iron key passes into the correct hand. Outside, the rain begins to ease. A strip of pale light appears through the narrow window. The final complaint concerns unpaid rent. A tenant has fallen behind after poor harvests and illness in his household. The steward recommends pressure. You ask how much grain he currently has. Not enough. How many children? 4. How much can realistically be recovered before spring? Very little. You arrange for part of the payment to be delayed and part converted into labour once the weather improves. It is not pure mercy. A ruined tenant pays nothing. A functioning household may eventually pay something. Practicality and compassion occasionally discover they have been walking the same road. When the final person leaves, the chamber suddenly becomes very quiet. The clerk sands the fresh ink on the parchment. The steward gathers the notes. You stand and flex stiff fingers. Outside, people cross the courtyard carrying buckets and baskets as though nothing significant has happened. Perhaps nothing has. No kingdom has changed hands. No army has marched. No saint has performed a miracle. But a widow keeps her meadow. A fence will be repaired. A path remains open. A debt has been given time. And one pig has acquired a reputation. You step back into the smoky warmth of the hall as the distant monastery bell begins to sound. Its slow notes roll through the damp afternoon. You think again of your husband somewhere beyond the muddy roads. In his absence, authority does not disappear. It settles into smaller rooms, beside inkpots and damp cloaks, among quarrels over geese, fields, wood, rent, and inheritance. And there, quietly, you learn how much of medieval order is maintained not by swords or banners, but by someone willing to sit through everyone's complaints until the bell tells you it is finally time to stop. By the next morning, the rain has passed, leaving the road beyond the manor gate shining beneath a pale strip of winter sunlight. You are going to market. The decision is less romantic than it sounds. There is no carefree wandering among colourful stalls, no leisurely choosing of ribbons while musicians play beneath striped awnings. You have a list. Salt, lamp oil, iron nails, 2 lengths of decent wool cloth, dried fish if the price is not absurd, a new wooden ladle because someone has somehow split the old one, and perhaps a small quantity of pepper if the merchant does not look at you as though each grain has personally travelled from the edge of the known world. You pull your fur-lined cloak around your shoulders and step into the courtyard. A cart waits near the gate. The steward travels with you, along with 2 servants and the grey mare you saw earlier. The dock appears before anyone has invited him. You point toward the hall. He sits down. You turn away. When you look back, he's already beside the cart. Some battles are lost before they begin. The road toward town is deeply rutted from recent rain. Wheels sink into soft earth. Bare branches drip above the hedges. Farther ahead, a pair of pilgrims move slowly along the roadside, their cloaks stained with mud and small badges pinned to their hats. Pilgrim badges can mark journeys to particular shrines and saints. Cheap ones are often made from lead alloy, purchased as souvenirs or devotional objects, then worn proudly enough that everyone knows where the owner has been. One pilgrim carries a scallop shell. Another has a tiny image of a saint fastened near his shoulder. You pass them near a roadside shrine where a small wooden cross stands beneath an old tree. Someone has left a few wilted flowers there. Someone else has tied a scrap of cloth to a branch. No one can quite agree whether the cloth is an offering, a prayer for healing, or simply the remnant of some older custom that refuses to disappear. You continue. The town wall becomes visible by late morning. Smoke rises beyond it. A church tower stands above clustered roofs. The gate is crowded with carts, pack animals, farmers, merchants, and people who appear to have chosen the narrowest possible place to stop and hold conversations. You join the line. At the gate, a toll collector examines the cart. The steward produces coins. A brief discussion follows concerning whether one basket should count separately. It does. Apparently the basket has achieved fiscal independence. You pay. Inside, the town feels immediately louder. Hooves strike stone. Vendors call from stalls. Chickens complain from wicker cages. A butcher sharpens a knife against a stone. A woman pours ale into wooden cups beneath a hanging sign. The smell changes every few steps: smoke, bread, fish, wool, onions, dung, hot fat, leather, damp straw. The market square is already crowded. You begin with salt. Salt is essential for preserving food, seasoning pottage, curing meat, and keeping winter stores useful. The merchant has several grades, and the cleanest costs more. You inspect it carefully. Moisture matters. Impurities matter. Price matters most of all. The merchant names a figure. You answer with a lower one. He looks wounded. You remain unmoved. After several minutes, the price descends to somewhere neither of you likes, which probably means the bargain is fair. The steward pays. Next comes cloth. At a textile stall, bolts of wool lie folded in russet, dull green, blue, brown, and muted saffron. You rub a piece between your fingers. Good cloth is valuable, and its quality can be judged by weight, weave, finish, and dye. You check for thin patches. The seller praises the colour. You ignore the praise and inspect the edge. One bolt is uneven. Another is better. You choose 2 lengths. Nearby, a woman sells narrow ribbons, thread, needles, and small household goods from trays. You purchase needles. They are tiny, easily lost, and maddeningly useful. A good needle can be more important to household peace than a decorative cup. It can also vanish into rushes and remain there until someone finds it with a foot. Medieval domestic suspense requires very little imagination. You move toward the fish stalls. Smoked herring hang in rows. Salted fish lie packed in barrels. The smell arrives before the stall does. You inspect the goods with care because badly preserved fish can turn a cheap purchase into a household disaster. One merchant insists his herring are the finest in town. Another says the first merchant's fish are older than the town wall. You choose neither immediately. Some swear that fish bought while church bells are ringing will keep longer in storage, provided they are carried home before sunset. Others insist that a fish with unusually bright eyes brings luck to a household. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone sincerely believes this or whether fishmongers simply benefit from customers finding spiritual significance in freshness. The bells ring. You buy the better-looking herring. It seems wise not to challenge both commerce and superstition at once. The ironmonger occupies a darker stall near the edge of the square. Nails, hinges, hooks, knives, buckles, and small tools hang from wooden boards. You need nails for roof repairs and an iron latch for a storeroom door. Metalwork costs money. Every nail represents skilled labour, fuel, iron, and time. You count carefully. The merchant weighs a small bundle on scales. You watch the balance. Market scales are objects of constant suspicion. False weights, short measures, watered ale, and inferior goods are common enough concerns that towns regulate them through officials and customary rules. The steward checks the weight stone. The merchant notices. His smile becomes slightly less warm. The balance settles. Fair enough. You pay. By midday, you stop near a cook shop where steam rises from a large pot. You eat bread, onions, and a portion of hot pottage while standing beneath an overhanging roof. The dog receives a crust from one servant. You pretend not to see. Around you, merchants continue shouting prices. A travelling seller displays little charms beside combs and buckles. One is shaped like a hand. Another bears a simple cross. A third looks vaguely like a tiny animal, though perhaps not an animal found in nature. Some people carry charms against fever, bad dreams, theft, or misfortune. Others trust blessed objects, relics, written prayers, or herbs. Practical shopping and spiritual insurance sit comfortably beside one another. You buy none. You already have enough mysterious objects in the manor. Instead, you purchase lamp oil and the replacement ladle. The pepper comes last. It is expensive. You ask for very little. The merchant measures it as though handling treasure. You understand why. Spices that travel immense distances through many hands arrive at northern markets transformed into luxury. You tuck the small packets securely into a pouch. By afternoon, the cart is heavier. Your purse is lighter. The list is nearly complete. You pass through the gate again after paying another small charge associated with movement. Goods, or the apparent medieval principle that every doorway deserves a coin. The road home glows faintly under lowering sunlight. Wheels creak. The wet wool of your cloak smells warm near your throat. Behind you, the town bells fade. Ahead, the manor waits with its storerooms, kitchens, damaged roof, accounts, servants, and supper fires. You glance back at the cart. Salt. Cloth? Fish. Iron? Oil. Needles. A ladle. A little pepper. Nothing heroic. Yet every object will be used. Every purchase keeps something moving. And as you follow the muddy road home, you understand that while your husband is away, even a simple market journey becomes another quiet thread holding the household together. The cart reaches the manor shortly before dusk, when the last light is fading from the wet road and the roofs inside the walls have become dark shapes against a violet sky. Servants come out to unload the salt, cloth, fish, oil, nails, and the precious little packet of pepper. The replacement ladle is carried toward the kitchen with considerably more ceremony than such an object deserves. The dog jumps down from the cart first. Naturally. You follow more carefully, stiff from the journey, and hand the storeroom keys to no one. Before you can reach the warmth of the hall, however, the gatekeeper calls from behind you. A rider is approaching. You turn. Beyond the open gate, a single horse moves slowly along the road through gathering mist. Its rider is hunched beneath a dark cloak, and the animal's flanks are streaked with mud almost to the saddle. A messenger. The thought passes through the courtyard before anyone speaks it. You stand still. For days, your husband has existed somewhere beyond the horizon, connected to this household only by memory, obligation, and whatever rumours happen to arrive. Now there may be a letter. The rider passes beneath the gate. His horse breathes heavily in the cold air, mud cakes his boots. A leather pouch hangs beneath his cloak, protected from rain by an outer wrapping of waxed cloth. He dismounts slowly. You're not the only person watching. Servants linger near doorways. The steward has appeared beside the stable. Even the clerk has somehow materialized with ink stains already on his fingers, as though letters summon him from walls. The messenger bows and produces a folded piece of parchment. A seal of dark wax holds it closed. You recognize the impression. Your husband's. Nothing about the parchment is large or impressive, yet the whole courtyard seems to become quieter around it. Letters in this world do not move quickly. They travel at the speed of horse, foot, riverboat, and weather. A washed-out bridge can delay them. A lame horse can delay them. Bandits, tolls, snow, swollen rivers, bad roads, illness, and simple human forgetfulness can delay them. A message written 3 days ago may already describe circumstances that no longer exist. You carry the letter inside. The hall feels warmer than it did before. A servant brings the messenger ale and bread while a groom tends his horse. Hospitality toward messengers is practical as well as courteous. A man who carries your letters tomorrow should ideally remember that your household fed him today. You sit near the hearth. The wax seal breaks beneath your thumb. The parchment unfolds. Your husband's handwriting is recognizable, though not especially graceful. You begin to read. He has reached another estate safely. The roads are poor. One bridge is nearly unusable. A dispute he expected to settle quickly has become more complicated. He may remain away longer than planned. There are instructions regarding a payment. A request that a particular tenant's account be checked. A reminder that roofing timber may need ordering. Then, near the end, a few lines asking after the household. After you. You read those twice. No one says anything. The fire cracks softly. Some medieval women read such letters themselves. Others rely on clerks, priests, household officials, relatives, or trusted servants, depending on education and circumstance. Literacy is uneven, and the ability to write may differ from the ability to read. Even when a woman cannot personally put words onto parchment, she can still dictate them. And tonight you have an answer to send. The clerk brings a writing board closer to the hearth. You speak slowly while he prepares ink. Oakgall ink has a sharp, earthy smell. It is made from ingredients that may include crushed galls, iron salts, gum, and water, producing a dark liquid that bites into parchment with remarkable permanence. The clerk trims his quill. You begin. The manor remains in good order. The miller's missing grain is still being investigated. The north pasture fence has been repaired. The sheep are sound except for one lame ewe. The widow Agnes retains her meadow according to established custom. The market journey succeeded. Salt and iron have been purchased. You consider mentioning the pig. You decide against it. A husband travelling distant roads has burdens enough. You add that roofing repairs should proceed before heavier weather arrives. The clerk writes. You tell him of the delayed tenant rent and the arrangement for later labour. You report the market prices. You mention that winter stores remain adequate but should be watched carefully. Each sentence turns daily household life into information that can travel. Letters between spouses are not necessarily romantic documents. Often they are practical. Money. Land. Children. Servants. Legal affairs. Illness. Travel. Requests for goods. Instructions. News of neighbours. Who owes what? Who has died? Who is married? Who is causing trouble? Affection may appear between these details, sometimes plainly, sometimes only through concern for safe travel or repeated requests for news. You add a final line wishing him good health. The clerk pauses. You think for a moment. Then you ask him to add that the household waits for his return. The quill scratches softly. Outside, the wind rises. The messenger finishes his meal and warms his hands by the fire. He cannot leave tonight. The roads are too dark, and the nearest safe lodging lies far enough away that only someone with very poor judgment would attempt the distance now. So he will sleep in the guest area and depart after dawn. This gives you time to include another small note. A neighbouring lady has sent word that her sister is ill. A merchant from the town claims wool prices may rise. A pilgrim road farther south is said to be unsafe. Some swear that a letter carried with a sprig of rosemary reaches its recipient safely because rosemary guards memory and faithful affection. Others tuck small devotional tokens into message pouches, trusting a saint to protect rider and parchment together. No one can quite agree whether messengers appreciate these customs or simply tolerate finding dried plants among their paperwork. You choose something more practical. The letter is folded. Warm sealing wax is softened near the candle. You press the household seal into it. The mark hardens. The clerk wraps the letter carefully against damp. For a moment, you hold it before handing it to the messenger. It is strange to think that this thin piece of parchment must cross the same muddy tracks you travelled earlier, past shrines and villages, perhaps wait at gates, perhaps shelter beneath monastery roofs, before reaching the person whose absence has reshaped your days. The messenger places it into his leather pouch. Safe for now. Later, after supper, you sit near the hearth while the household grows quiet. The market goods are stored. The new iron nails wait for the carpenter. The smoked fish hangs beyond the dog's reach. The beeswax candle beside you burns low. You hear rain beginning again against the shutters. Somewhere beyond those walls, other messengers are travelling other roads, carrying requests, warnings, accounts, promises, family news, and fragments of lives folded beneath wax seals. Your husband may be only several days away, yet distance in this world feels deeper than miles. It is measured in weather, hoofbeats, river crossings, broken wheels, toll gates, and the uncertain arrival of parchment. You look toward the sleeping messenger near the far wall. At dawn, the road will take your words away. Until another rider appears beneath the gate, you will continue as before, listening for bells, watching stores, counting coins, settling quarrels, and occasionally glancing toward the road. The messenger leaves before the sun has properly risen. You watch from beneath the gatehouse as his horse picks its way over the wet road, the leather pouch containing your sealed letter tucked safely beneath his cloak. Mist hangs low across the fields. The monastery bell sounds once beyond the trees, then again, each note fading slowly into the grey morning. You stand there until the rider disappears. Then someone behind you coughs. Not the polite little cough of a servant hoping to attract attention. This one is deeper, rougher. You turn. A kitchen maid stands near the wall with one hand pressed against her chest. Her face is pale beneath the soot and morning cold. The steward notices too. By breakfast, you learn that she is not the only one feeling poorly. An older servant complains of aching joints. A stable hand has a swollen finger after catching it beneath a buckle. One of the washerwomen says a younger sister has been feverish since the previous evening. The household has discovered another thing that does not pause simply because your husband is away. Sickness. You cross into the kitchen, where heat gathers thickly beneath soot-black rafters. Pottage simmers in an iron pot. Bundles of herbs hang from beams. Garlic, onions, sage, and dried leaves fill the air with a sharp, earthy smell. The pale maid sits on a stool beside the hearth. A wool blanket has been wrapped around her shoulders. You touch the back of your fingers to her forehead. Warm. Not burning, but warmer than you would like. There is no physician waiting conveniently in the next room. In a wealthy household, a trained medical practitioner might sometimes be summoned, especially for serious illness. But ordinary care often begins much closer to home. Women know remedies. So do monks. So do village healers, apothecaries, barbers, midwives, priests, experienced servants, and elderly relatives who have survived long enough to become authorities on nearly everything. You send for one of the older women in the household. She arrives carrying a small wooden box. Inside are dried herbs, strips of linen, a lump of beeswax, a little jar of salve, and several objects whose medical value seems less obvious. One is a red thread. Another is a small piece of polished bone. You decide not to ask yet. The woman crushes sage and hyssop with a small stone pestle. She adds hot water and a little honey. Her movements are confident. Her explanation is not. Some swear that certain herbs are warming, others cooling, and that illness arises when the body's qualities fall out of balance. Learned medicine often speaks of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, while household practice mixes such ideas with local experience, inherited recipes, prayer, and whatever happened to help someone's aunt 20 years ago. No one can quite agree whether that aunt had the same illness. The maid drinks the warm mixture anyway. You arrange for her to rest. That sounds simple. It is not. Servants are part of the household machinery, and when one stops working, someone else must lift the missing weight. Another maid takes over part of the kitchen work. A younger servant carries water. The cook complains under his breath, though not so quietly that anyone could mistake his position on unexpected staffing changes. You leave him to it. The stable hand comes next. His finger is swollen and bruised, but not badly broken. You examine it beside the doorway where the light is better. The older woman applies a cool poultice made from crushed herbs and wraps it with linen. The man says a neighbour once cured a similar injury by placing the hand beneath the belly of a sleeping black dog. You look toward the familiar muddy dog near the hearth. He opens one eye. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such cures are serious traditions, jokes that survive too long, or desperate experiments performed because medieval medicine offers very few guarantees. You suggest the poultice. The dog appears relieved. Later you visit the washerwoman's sister in a small cottage beyond the manor yard. The path is slick beneath your boots. Smoke leaks through the thatch. Inside, the room is warmer than outside but dim. A little fire burns on the hearth. A wooden bucket stands beside the wall. Coarse wool blankets cover the sick woman. Her fever is higher. A cup of watered ale sits untouched nearby. Someone has hung a small saint's medal from a cord above the bed. Beside it is a bunch of dried herbs. The boundaries between healing and devotion are thin here. People pray for recovery because recovery is never certain. A priest may be called, relics may be touched or carried, holy water may be sprinkled. A pilgrimage vow may be promised if someone survives a dangerous sickness. Practical remedies continue at the same time. The woman's family has placed cool cloths on her forehead. They have given her broth. They keep the room warm but not stifling. These things make sense to you. Then her mother produces a charm written on a narrow scrap of parchment. The words are partly Latin, partly cutting less clear. She wants it tied near the bed. You permit it. It costs nothing. And if it makes the family feel less helpless, it has already done one useful thing. Back at the manor, another problem waits. A tenant has arrived with a swollen ankle. Then a child from one of the outer cottages needs a salve for cracked skin. Then an elderly servant asks for something to ease a toothache. For that, the remedies become especially creative. Clove is valuable when available. Herbs may be chewed. Salt water may be used. Hot compresses may be applied. And there are charms invoking saints associated with tooth pain. Some remedies are soothing. Some are useless. Some are probably worse than the tooth. You select the gentlest options. By afternoon, the household smells less like a manor and more like a cupboard belonging to an enthusiastic herbalist. Sage, rue, rosemary, honey, vinegar, warm wool, wood smoke, a little garlic. The clerk passes through carrying parchment and pauses long enough to sneeze. You tell him he is not ill. He says nothing. Wise man. Near sunset, a monk arrives from the nearby religious house. He has come partly because word of the feverish woman has travelled, and partly because the monastery sometimes provides remedies prepared from its own garden. His habit is damp at the hem. He brings a small jar of ointment and a packet of dried herbs. He also carries a tiny relic wrapped carefully in cloth. The suspicious monk from earlier days would probably approve of the ceremony surrounding it, although no one can quite agree whether this particular fragment truly belonged to the saint named on the label. You do not argue. The monk prays quietly with the household. Then he recommends rest and broth. At least everyone agrees on something. When darkness settles, you return to the hall. The pale kitchen maid is sleeping. The stable hand's finger is wrapped. The feverish woman beyond the yard has been made as comfortable as possible. Nothing is solved completely. That is the troubling part. You can count grain. You can lock a chest. You can repair a fence. Illness does not always obey instructions. So you sit beside the fire while the beeswax candle burns lower and listen to the slow breathing of the household around you. While your husband travels distant roads, you find yourself responsible not only for store, rents, land, and disputes, but for bodies that tire, swell, ache, fever, and fail. And in a world where medicine remains uncertain, care itself becomes one of the most important things you can offer. The monk leaves after sunrise, carrying his empty herb packet and the little wrapped relic back toward the monastery while frost brightens along the edges of the road. You watch him pass through the gate. Behind you, the household is quieter than usual. The feverish maid still rests near the kitchen. The stable hand's injured finger remains wrapped in linen. The woman in the cottage beyond the yard has survived the night, though her fever has not entirely broken. For the moment, There is nothing more you can do for them except wait and pray. The monastery bell begins to sound across the fields. Its slow notes seem to gather everything together: the cold air, the wet roofs, the smoke climbing from chimneys, the bare branches shining with frost. Today you walk toward the parish church. A servant accompanies you, carrying a small basket. Inside are coarse loaves, several onions, a little dried fish, and a folded length of worn but usable cloth. Alms, not grand charity, not the sort that will be recorded in a splendid manuscript beneath a painted halo. Just food and cloth that someone poorer than you may need. You leave the manor by the east gate and follow a narrow path between fields. The mud has frozen hard overnight, preserving hoofprints and wagon ruts in ridges beneath your boots. Near a roadside shrine, someone has placed a fresh beeswax candle before a carved wooden saint. The flame trembles in the wind. A pilgrim badge has been tied to the little rail below it. You pause briefly. Some swear that prayers spoken at certain shrines travel more swiftly to heaven, especially when offered before sunrise or on the saint's feast day. Others believe that touching a badge or cloth to a holy image allows it to carry a trace of blessing home. No one can quite agree whether every such object is genuinely sacred, but almost everyone treats the possibility with caution. You touch the wooden rail. Then you continue. The church stands at the edge of the village, its stone walls damp and dark beneath the winter sky. Inside, the air changes immediately. Cold stone, wax, old incense, wool cloaks, a faint smell of damp rushes. Small candles glow before painted saints, whose faces look solemn in the half-light, their colours red, blue, faded gold seem warmer than anything outside. You kneel. Mass begins. You do not understand every Latin word. Few people around you do, but the rhythm is familiar. Standing, kneeling, crossing yourself, listening for bells, watching the priest move before the altar. Religion here is not separate from ordinary household life. It is woven through it. Feast days influence work. Fasting days influence food. Bells organize hours. Saints are invoked during illness, childbirth, travel, storms, harvest, and danger. Marriage, inheritance, death, charity, burial, and family memory all pass through sacred spaces. While your husband is away, part of maintaining the household means maintaining these obligations too. You have prayers requested for his safe travel. A small payment has already been made for one candle to burn near the altar. Another offering will support prayers for deceased relatives whose names remain connected to the family. You place a coin carefully into the church box. Not too much. The roof still needs timber. Even salvation must occasionally share a budget with carpentry. After Mass, you speak with the priest near the side aisle. He asks after the sick maid. You tell him she rests. Still away. You mention the uncertain roads and the letter received yesterday. The priest says he will include another prayer for safe return. You thank him. Then comes something more practical. The church expects support. Depending on place and custom, households may owe tithes, offerings, rents, gifts, labour, or assistance connected to religious institutions. Wealthier families may patronize chapels, maintain lights, support clerics, donate food, or contribute to building repairs. Your manor has obligations of its own. A portion of grain has been promised. Wax is needed for candles. The feast of a local saint approaches, which means additional preparation. You make a note to have the steward confirm what was given the previous year. Medieval piety has paperwork. Naturally. Outside the church, several poor villagers wait near the wall. You open the basket. The loaves are distributed first, then onions, then dried fish. The cloth goes to an older woman whose cloak has been patched so many times that the original fabric is now mostly a rumour. She takes it carefully. Giving alms is both charity and religious duty. People believe generosity toward the poor can benefit the soul, and wealth brings obligations as well as comfort. You know the theology, but standing here in the wind, watching someone fold a piece of old cloth as though it were valuable, the matter feels less abstract. A little farther along the churchyard, a woman kneels near a grave. She has placed evergreen sprigs on the mound. Another person leaves a small loaf beside a cross. Customs surrounding the dead vary, and not every priest approves of every local habit. Some swear that food left near graves is simply charity intended for the poor. Others whisper older explanations involving restless souls and hungry spirits. Even now, it's hard to tell where devotion ends and inherited superstition begins. You do not disturb her. Instead, you walk toward the monastery. The path climbs slightly through bare woodland. Crows move between branches above you. The distant walls appear pale through the trees. At the gate, a lay brother receives you. You have come to arrange another small offering. The monastery regularly prays for families connected to the surrounding estates, and in return those households may provide grain, candles, money, livestock, or other goods. Inside the guest courtyard, an ink-stained scribe sits near a covered passage copying names into a book. Your husband's name is added to a list for prayers. So is the name of the feverish woman from the cottage. The scribe pauses to dry the ink. You notice that he has accidentally stained the side of his hand black. He notices you noticing. Neither of you mentions it. Near the chapel, a reliquary rests behind ironwork. It supposedly contains a fragment associated with a local saint. Some pilgrims have travelled several days to see it. One elderly man kneels nearby wearing a cluster of pilgrim badges that make him look less like a humble traveller and more like a walking market stall. The suspicious monk you met yesterday appears again near the doorway. He watches the relic with an expression so serious that you briefly wonder whether he distrusts the saint, the pilgrims, or everyone equally. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this particular relic is authentic. That does not stop the candles. You light one for your husband, for the sick, for the household. The flame catches slowly, then steadies. By late afternoon, you begin walking home. The monastery bells follow you across the frozen fields. At the roadside shrine, the morning candle is burned almost to nothing. You pause once more before continuing toward the manor walls. Smoke rises from the kitchen. Servants cross the yard. A horse stamps in the stable. Nothing appears transformed. Yet the day has bound the household to something beyond gates, rents, grain, and keys. To parish, to monastery, to saint, to memory, to obligation. And as the evening bell rolls through the cold air, you understand that while your husband is absent, even faith becomes part of the work you quietly carry for both of you. The evening bell is still fading when you see the first torch beyond the gate. At first it is only a small amber point moving through the winter dusk, appearing and disappearing behind bare branches. Then another light joins it. Then the shape of horses emerges from the road, their breath rising white in the cold. The gatekeeper calls down, "Visitors, you've barely removed your cloak from the walk back from the monastery." Apparently the household has decided that prayer should be followed immediately by hospitality. You cross the courtyard as the gates open. 3 riders enter first. Behind them comes a pack horse, a servant on foot, and an elderly cleric wrapped in a heavy wool mantle. Mud reaches halfway up every boot. One horse has thrown foam along its bit. Another shakes its mane beneath the torchlight. The leading rider is a minor nobleman from an estate 2 days to the west. You recognize his colours. His wife's brother once attended a feast here. Or perhaps it was his cousin. Medieval kinship has a remarkable ability to become complicated precisely when you are expected to remember it. The steward leans toward you and quietly supplies the name. You greet the visitors. They have been delayed by poor roads and a damaged bridge. Night has caught them before they could reach their intended lodging. They ask shelter. You grant it. Hospitality is not merely kindness in this world, it is expectation, reputation, alliance, and practical survival. Roads are uncertain. Inns can be crowded or unpleasant. Monasteries may offer guest accommodation, but they are not always nearby. A respectable household receives respectable travellers when it can. The difficult part is deciding what respectable means before breakfast. Servants hurry into motion. Horses are led toward the stable. Wet cloaks are taken. A bench near the hearth is cleared. The older cleric immediately stretches both hands toward the fire with the expression of a man who has spent several hours reconsidering every decision that brought him onto a winter road. You understand completely. The guests are offered warm ale. A servant brings coarse bread and cheese while the kitchen prepares something more substantial. The nobleman apologizes for arriving without warning. You assure him the household can manage. Behind you, the cook hears this. His face suggests a different theological interpretation of the word manage. You wisely avoid looking at him. The hall changes around the visitors. More candles are lit. Not the cheapest tallow lights tonight, but several beeswax candles from the cupboard you counted earlier. Their cleaner flame warms the tables with soft gold. Fresh rushes are scattered near the guest benches. A servant places rosemary among them for scent. Another carries in an extra brazier. You remember exactly how many candles remain. Hospitality is easier when someone else is not counting them. The nobleman sits beside the hearth and begins describing the road. A cart overturned near the river. A bridge plank has broken. A group of pilgrims is travelling east. There are rumours of armed men farther south, although no one can quite agree whether they are thieves, retainers belonging to a local lord, or ordinary travellers who have become more impressive each time the story is repeated. You listen carefully. Travellers carry news. That makes guests useful. It also makes them dangerous to trust too quickly. A merchant arriving after dark may know grain prices in another town. A priest may know which families are ill. A knight may know where soldiers are moving. A pilgrim may know what happened 50 miles away, or may know what someone in an alehouse claimed happened 50 miles away. The distinction matters. You ask quiet questions. Which bridge? Which road? How many men? When were they seen? The guest answers as best he can. You store the information away. Meanwhile, the household prepares supper. The kitchen has no time for magnificence. Pottage is enriched with salted meat. Smoked fish comes from the stores. There is coarse bread, cheese, onions, and a dish of dried peas. A small amount of pepper appears in one pot. You recognize the packet purchased at market. So does the steward. Neither of you says anything. A guest has arrived. Apparently the pepper has found its destiny. Before eating, places must be arranged. Rank matters. So does courtesy. The most important guest sits nearer the upper end of the hall and closest to the main hearth. Servants and lower-ranking members of the household eat farther away. A cleric receives appropriate respect. A travelling servant does not sit beside his master simply because both have equally muddy feet. These distinctions are understood almost instinctively by people who have lived within them. Still, mistakes happen. Seating someone below a person they believe inferior can cause offence. Seating someone too high can offend everyone else. The safest medieval supper, you discover, may be one where nobody notices where they are sitting. You take your place. Wooden trenches are set out. Ale is poured. Supper begins. Conversation moves slowly. The nobleman asks after your husband. You explain that he remains away on business and may return later than first expected. There is a brief pause. Not an uncomfortable one. Just enough for you to notice that everyone understands what his absence means. You are receiving them. You are deciding what is served. You're controlling the household tonight. The visitor asks about the estate roads. You tell him which track is safest after rain. The cleric asks whether the nearby monastery still receives travellers. You say it does. Then he mentions the relic. That relic. The one no one entirely trusts. He has heard that touching a strip of cloth to its reliquary protects travellers from sudden storms. The suspicious monk would enjoy this conversation immensely. Some swear that travellers should carry a saint's token, a piece of blessed wax, or a sprig of herbs when sleeping beneath an unfamiliar roof. Others place shoes carefully beside the bed because leaving one turned upside down is said to invite bad dreams. You glance toward the guest chamber being prepared. If an inverted shoe is tonight's greatest danger, the household will consider itself fortunate. After supper, servants clear the tables. Bread scraps are gathered. The better trenchers may be passed onward or used according to household custom rather than wasted. Ale continues to circulate. The guests warm themselves while bedding is arranged. A respectable bed is a serious piece of household equipment. Mattresses may be stuffed with straw, wool, feathers, or combinations depending on wealth. Wool blankets are layered against the cold. Better guests receive better rooms, though better still means draughts have opinions. You inspect the chamber yourself. Fresh linen, 2 wool blankets, a small basin, a pitcher of water, a stool, a candle. The oak door closes properly. That last detail seems particularly luxurious. You also arrange sleeping places for the servants in less private quarters. The horses receive oats and hay. The pack-horse is checked. The stable doors are secured. Everything connected to hospitality has a cost. Food, fuel, fooder, candles, labour, linen, space. But it also creates obligation. A guest treated well remembers. A neighbouring household may return the favour when your own people travel. News moves through these connections. So do alliances. So does reputation. Later, when the hall has become quieter, you sit beside the hearth with the last cup of ale. The nobleman and cleric have retired. The servants settle. The dog lies across the warmest patch of floor as though he personally negotiated the evening's arrangements. You think about strangers beneath your roof. Hospitality requires openness. Household authority requires caution. So you have welcomed them, fed them, listened to them, watched them, and placed them behind sturdy oak doors. There is a balance in that. Outside, frost begins forming over the courtyard stones. Inside, the candles shorten. Your husband remains somewhere beyond the dark roads. Yet his household has received travellers, exchanged news, offered shelter, protected its reputation, and survived another evening without him. You draw your cloak closer around your shoulders. Tomorrow the guest will ride on. Tonight they sleep beneath your roof. and you remain awake a little longer, listening to the wind test the shutters and wondering how many medieval friendships begin exactly this way, with mud, cold horses, unexpected supper, and a knock at the gate after dark. By dawn, the guests are already preparing to leave. The nobleman's servant carries saddlebags into the courtyard while a groom tightens girths beneath a sky the colour of ash. The elderly cleric accepts a final cup of warm ale and wraps his wool mantle close around his shoulders. Frost crunches beneath boots, and horse breath hangs in the air like smoke. You stand near the gate while farewells are exchanged. The nobleman thanks you for shelter. The cleric blesses the household. Then the small procession passes beneath the gatehouse and disappears onto the road. For several moments everyone watches. Then the manor exhales. Servants begin carrying guest bedding away. Used trenchers are gathered. Cups vanish toward the kitchen. Rushes are swept aside where muddy boots have crushed them into dark patches. The household is becoming itself again. But something changes after visitors leave. News remains. So do impressions. By afternoon, fragments of last night's conversation have travelled farther through the manor than the guests themselves. The cook knows about the damaged bridge. The laundress knows about the pilgrims. A maid has heard there may be armed men on the southern road. Someone else insists the cleric said wool prices are rising, though you're fairly certain he said nothing of the kind. Information moves strangely inside a household, especially among women. That evening, after supper, you discover just how much. The hall grows quiet earlier than usual. The trestle tables are cleared. Men connected with the stable and outer yard drift toward their sleeping places. The clerk carries his parchment into a side chamber. The steward disappears with a cup of ale, and the expression of a man who has spent the day remembering everyone else's obligations. Near the smaller hearth, however, several women remain. A maid mends a torn sleeve. The laundress folds linen. An older widow from a nearby cottage has come to return a borrowed wooden bowl. One of the cooks shells dried peas into a wicker basket. A younger woman cards wool. Another twists thread between practised fingers. You settle among them. The fire burns low and red. This is not a formal gathering. No one has summoned anyone. It simply happens because work continues after darkness, and work is easier near warmth. Hands remain busy. Voices soften. The room becomes different. You hear first about the feverish woman. Her temperature has fallen. She ate broth. Good news. Then the washerwoman mentions a salve her mother once used for winter cracked hands, goose fat mixed with herbs and a little beeswax. Another woman says sheep fat works better. The widow insists both are inferior to a preparation made with plantain leaves. No one can quite agree whether any of them remembers the recipe correctly. You listen anyway. This is how much practical knowledge travels. Not through books, not through scholars, through repetition. A mother teaches a daughter how long to boil linen. A cook shows a maid how to judge bread dough by touch. An older woman knows which herbs soothe a cough. A widow remembers which merchant cheats at weights. A laundress knows which stream floods first after heavy rain. A servant knows which guest drinks too much and talks too freely. Such knowledge rarely appears in grand chronicles, yet households depend upon it. The younger woman carding wool asks whether the southern road is truly unsafe. You repeat only what you know. A traveller heard rumours. Nothing more. The widow snorts softly. She says her nephew travelled that road 3 days ago and saw no armed band except 2 foresters carrying axes. The cook pauses. By tomorrow morning, you suspect the mysterious bandits will have become 2 irritated woodsmen. This is the other side of household information. Gossip. It can warn. It can help. It can also grow legs. Some swear that repeating malicious gossip beside a fire causes the lie to return to the speaker before the embers die. Others say a person who bites the tip of the tongue after speaking another's name can prevent the words from bringing misfortune. The laundress demonstrates this solemnly. Everyone laughs quietly. You cannot tell whether she believes it. Even now, it's hard to tell whether such habits are superstition, humour, or a convenient excuse to stop talking before one says too much. The conversation shifts. A neighbouring wife needs help during the next wash day because her sister is ill. 2 women agree to go. The widow needs someone to carry a sack of meal from the mill. A maid knows a boy who can do it. The cook has spare onions. Someone else has thread. A small network forms almost without announcement. Goods move. Labour moves. Favours move. When husbands travel, fall ill, die, or simply work too far away to solve a problem before sunset, these exchanges become especially valuable. Not every woman has authority over a manor. Most do not. Yet many manage some combination of food, children, animals, textile work, trade, brewing, gardening, fuel, household goods, and neighbourhood obligations. And women lean on other women. You see it plainly here. The widow once helped the laundress through a difficult winter. The laundress now washes altar cloths for the widow's parish duty. The cook knows which woman in the village has a laying hen to spare. The maid knows which tenant family needs old blankets. Someone remembers who borrowed a bucket last spring. No account book records most of it. Still, everyone remembers. Mostly, there is some dispute about the bucket. The dog wanders over and collapses near the hearth. A woman scratches behind his ears. He has finally found a counsel willing to admit him without resistance. The fire settles lower. The laundress begins describing a charm sometimes used when a husband travels. A small knot tied in red thread. 3 turns, she says. The widow says 7. The cook says her grandmother used blue thread. The younger maid says her mother simply made sure her husband took dry socks. You decide the mother may have been the wisest mystic among them. The talk softens again. A birth expected in a neighbouring household. A daughter soon old enough for service. A woman considering selling ale. A widow worried about rent. A maid saving coins. None of these matters will trouble kings. They matter here. You look around the firelit circle. Needles move through cloth. Peas fall softly into the basket. Wool gathers into neat bundles. The hall beyond them is almost dark. Your husband is still absent. Yet you are not alone. Around you exists another kind of household structure. One built not from oak beams or iron keys, but from memory, trust, exchange, warning, skill, and favours that may be returned months or years later. When the last monastery bell sounds across the dark fields, the women begin to rise. Baskets are lifted. Thread is wound away. The borrowed bowl finally reaches the person it was meant for. You remain by the dying hearth for another moment. The manor is quiet, but beneath that quiet runs a web of knowledge and assistance almost invisible from the outside. And tonight you understand that when medieval women kept households going during long absences, they rarely did it entirely by themselves. They did it together. The next morning begins with a rumour. It arrives before breakfast, carried not by a sealed messenger or a mounted official, but by a carter whose left wheel is cracked somewhere beyond the southern ford. He enters the manor yard with mud to his knees, rain beaded across his hood, and a story already growing larger with every person who listens. There has been trouble on the road. Perhaps fighting, perhaps robbery, perhaps nothing at all. You stand beneath the covered passage while the steward questions him. Behind you, servants carry buckets from the well. A groom leads a horse through the stable door. The dog sits beside your boots, watching the carter as though he alone intends to determine the truth. The man says he saw smoke beyond a wooded ridge. He also heard that 2 merchants failed to reach the town yesterday. He did not see the merchants himself. Someone at an alehouse told him. The alehouse keeper heard it from a pilgrim. The pilgrim supposedly heard it from a man whose cousin travels with a wool merchant. This is how certainty travels in the Middle Ages. By the time news has crossed 3 villages, a broken wagon can become a battle and 2 late merchants can become an army. No one can quite agree whether anything serious has happened. That does not mean you can ignore it. You remember the travellers who slept beneath your roof, the cleric's warning about uncertain southern roads, and the widow's nephew who had seen nothing more dangerous than foresters. Now the road feels uncertain again. You send for the steward. The first decision is simple. No cart leaves south today. A planned journey for salt can wait. A servant meant to carry a message to a neighbouring manor will take the western track instead. 2 men are sent no farther than the outer fields to ask passing travellers what they have seen. You do not close the gates. That would create panic. But you tell the gatekeeper to watch carefully. The iron bar remains close at hand. By mid-morning another traveller arrives. This one is a wool merchant travelling north with 2 pack horses and an exhausted servant. He has come from farther south than the carter. You ask what he saw. Nothing. No armed men. No burned village. No bodies in the road. Only rain, a flooded ditch, and 1 overturned cart. The carter looks slightly disappointed that civilization appears to have survived. Then the merchant adds that an innkeeper told him soldiers had passed eastward 3 days before. How many? Perhaps 12. Perhaps 30. Perhaps none. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how a dozen tired retainers can become 50 raiders between 1 tavern and the next. You offer the merchant ale anyway. His horses receive water. Information is easier to gather when people are warm. You listen. The soldiers, if soldiers they were, wore no colours he recognised. They may have belonged to a local lord. They may have been escorting someone. They may have been returning home. Nothing is certain. That uncertainty is the problem. A household preparing for obvious danger can act decisively. A household preparing for rumour must act carefully enough to be safe without consuming all its food, frightening tenants, or barricading itself against imaginary armies. You walk through the manor yard. The familiar details suddenly seem different. The timber gate, the stable, the stacks of firewood, the winter storehouse, the oak doors, the iron keys at your waist. You begin with supplies. The storeroom is checked again. Grain remains adequate. Salted meat hangs where it should. Smoked fish is counted. Barrels are inspected. The cook has enough flour for several days without further purchase. You instruct him to avoid unnecessary waste until the road situation becomes clearer. He looks offended. The cook considers waste to be something other kitchens do. You let him preserve that belief. Next comes water. Buckets remain ready near the well, not because you expect a siege, because any disturbance can interfere with ordinary routines, and preparedness in a medieval household often means ensuring that the most boring necessities remain available. The carpenter checks the gate bar. The hinge repaired last season still holds. 2 shutters in the lower rooms need stronger pegs. A loose section of fencing near the stable is fixed before dusk. There is no dramatic fortification. No boiling oil. No heroic speech from the battlements. Mostly there are men hammering pieces of wood while rain drips down their sleeves. Medieval defense is frequently less magnificent than illuminated manuscripts suggest. You also send quiet word to several tenant households. Do not travel south without need. Bring livestock closer at night. Report unfamiliar groups on the road. Do not spread wild stories. The final instruction will almost certainly fail first. By midday, someone in the village has already heard that 50 armed men are marching toward the manor. An hour later, the number reaches 100. A maid claims they have banners. No one has seen any banners. You rub your forehead. The clerk wisely avoids smiling. Rumour has become the most energetic member of the household. Some swear that placing an iron knife beneath a threshold prevents hostile strangers from crossing it. Others hang hawthorn, rowan, or blessed palm near doors for protection. In some places, protective marks are scratched into timber or stone to turn away harmful forces that locks cannot stop. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a household uses such customs because it expects supernatural danger or because familiar rituals make uncertain nights easier to endure. An old servant quietly places a small iron object near the gatehouse door. You leave it there. It does not interfere with the lock. That is enough. Late in the afternoon, the monastery sends news. A lay brother arrives on foot with his cloak soaked dark from rain. Several travellers have reached the guest house from the south. They report no fighting. One wagon was robbed 2 days away, but even that account is uncertain. The missing merchants have apparently arrived safely at another town after taking a longer road around a flooded crossing. The danger shrinks. Not entirely, but enough. You release a breath you had not realized you were holding. The gate remains guarded after sunset. The southern journey remains postponed until morning. Still, the household settles. Pottage is served. Bread is cut. A little smoked fish appears on the trenches. The familiar monastery bell reaches you through the rain. You sit beside the hearth with a wool blanket around your shoulders, listening as servants repeat revised versions of the day's news. The 100 armed men have become 20, then 12, then perhaps only travellers. By bedtime, one maid has decided they were never there at all. The truth is probably somewhere along the muddy road between every version. You look toward the oak doors. Your husband travels roads like those. That thought is harder to dismiss than the rumours. Every delayed messenger, swollen river, broken wheel, unfamiliar rider, or distant column of smoke may mean nothing. Or something. And until certainty arrives, you learn to do what medieval households have always done. You keep the stores full. You keep the gates sound. You listen carefully. You believe slowly, and as the watchfire glows beyond the courtyard, you let the manor settle into another guarded, ordinary night. The next morning brings certainty at last. Not much, just enough. A rider appears shortly after the first monastery bell, emerging through a low veil of mist along the western road. He wears your husband's colours beneath a travel-stained cloak, and when the gatekeeper calls down from above, the entire courtyard seems to wake before the man has even dismounted. You're already crossing the yard when he reaches the stable. His horse is tired but sound. The rider bows and hands you a short folded message. The wax seal is familiar. You break it beneath the covered passage while cold air moves around your ankles. Your husband is returning. If the roads remain passable, he should reach the manor within 2 days. Perhaps 3. No one can quite agree whether a medieval estimate involving winter roads should ever be trusted more precisely than that. You read the message again. Then you look up. The household is waiting. the steward, the clerk, 2 maids near the kitchen door, a groom pretending not to listen, the dog, who has no idea what anyone is discussing but seems confident it concerns him. You fold the parchment, and suddenly everything you've been maintaining for weeks must now be made ready to be seen. The first task is the hall. Servants lift benches and begin removing the old rushes from the floor. Dust rises, crumbs appear, a button is found. So is an ancient chicken bone that has somehow survived several cleanings and may now qualify as part of the building. Fresh rushes are brought in from storage. Some are mixed with sweet-smelling herbs, perhaps mint, rosemary, or meadowsweet where available to soften the odour of smoke. Bodies, damp wool, and everything else a crowded medieval hall collects. You inspect the hearth. Ash is cleared. Firewood is stacked. A cracked stool is removed before anyone important sits on it and discovers the problem personally. The carpenter is called. He's already repaired the tenant's plough, strengthened the north pasture gate, and checked the manor doors during the recent rumours. Now you send him toward the loose shutter in the upper chamber, then toward a bench with a dangerous wobble, then toward a small section of roof where rain has been finding its way through with the persistence of a tax collector. He listens to the list. His expression remains respectful. His soul, you suspect, has gone somewhere quieter. You leave him with the roof. Next comes linen. The linen chest opens beneath your iron key. Sheets are counted again. Guest cloths are checked. Better table linens are removed and aired near the fire, though not so close that a spark can turn household preparation into a very different kind of event. 2 women carry blankets into the courtyard while the sun is out. They beat dust from them. Another launders smaller cloths in heated water, working soap through the fibres before rinsing and wringing them. Washing linen is heavy work. Water must be drawn. Wood must be burned. Cloth must be scrubbed, carried, dried, folded and stored. Nothing about a clean sheet is simple once you have watched how it arrives. You move toward the kitchen. The cook has already heard the news. Of course he has. Information travels faster through a manor kitchen than through most royal chancelleries. He stands beside the hearth discussing provisions with 2 assistants. You inspect the stores together. Smoked fish, salted meat, dried peas, beans, flour, onions, cheese, ale, a small quantity of spices. The pepper packet is considerably lighter since the unexpected guests arrived. You say nothing. A returning lord should probably not be greeted with an investigation into vanished pepper. Instead, you approve extra bread for the expected day of arrival. A bird may be roasted if one can be spared. Pottage will be richer than usual. I'll must be ready. If travellers accompany your husband, there must be enough for them too. This is always the difficulty. A man may announce that he is returning. He rarely announces exactly how many hungry people will appear behind him. By midday, the stable-yard is busy. Fresh straw is spread in the stalls. Saddles are checked. Oats are measured. Water troughs are cleaned. A groom inspects the grey mare and 2 spare horses. If your husband arrives with tired mounts, they will need rubbing down, water, fodder, and shelter before anyone settles near the fire. You run your hand along the top of a stall door. Everything smells of hay, leather, horse breath, and cold timber. The dog follows you inside. He immediately steals a tuft of straw and carries it away. His contribution to preparation remains mysterious. From the stable, you move into the small chamber where the clerk has assembled the accounts. This may be the most important preparation of all. Rents received, wages paid, market purchases, repair costs, delayed debts, the widow Agnes and a meadow, the fine for the boundary oak, the damaged fence, the miller's grain, the southern road precautions. Each matter is arranged carefully. You ask for older parchments to be placed beneath the newer records so the sequence is clear. Tally sticks are bundled. Coins remaining in the coffer are counted once more. The iron key turns. You know what has been spent. You know why. That knowledge matters. A woman managing a household during her husband's absence cannot rely merely upon saying that everything went well. She may need to show how well. The afternoon brings another kind of preparation. You speak with the steward about tenants who may arrive to greet the returning lord. You send word to the outer farms that his arrival is expected, though no one should abandon necessary work simply to stand in mud beside a gate. Naturally, several people will do exactly that. A maid asks whether fresh rosemary should be hung near the hall entrance. Some swear that rosemary welcomes safe return and preserves affection between husband and wife. Others place evergreen near doorways, light a candle before a favoured saint, or keep a little blessed wax in the chamber until the traveller is home. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which customs are old, which are local, and which have survived because no household wants to risk being the first to stop doing them. You allow the rosemary. It smells pleasant. That is reason enough. Near sunset, you walk through the manor one last time. The hall has fresh rushes. The linen is drying. The kitchen is louder than usual. The stable is ready. The accounts are ordered. The repaired shutter closes properly. Even the roof seems temporarily persuaded not to leak. Outside the gate, the road stretches pale beneath the fading sky. You stand there with your cloak pulled close and imagine hoofbeats coming through the dark. For weeks, your husband's absence has shaped every decision. Now his return shapes them instead. Yet the work is the same in one important way. Nothing happens by magic. A homecoming requires bread, dry bedding, clean floors, sound doors, fed horses, settled accounts, and dozens of small hands preparing everything before anyone sees the gate open. You turn back toward the hall as the evening bell begins. The rosemary moves gently above the doorway. The beeswax candles wait unlit. And somewhere beyond the darkening fields, if the roads are kind, your husband is finally riding home. The next day passes without hoofbeats. Then another morning begins, pale and cold, and still the road beyond the gate remains empty. You tell yourself this means nothing. Winter roads are slow. Bridges break. Wheels sink. Horses tire. A journey promised in 2 days may become 3 without any disaster at all. Still, you find yourself looking toward the gate more often than necessary. The fresh rushes in the hall remain green. The rosemary above the doorway is beginning to curl at the edges. The cook has postponed roasting the bird because even he understands that meat should not be sacrificed to an uncertain timetable. The household waits. And while it waits, you walk through everything one last time. Not to prepare it, to understand it. You begin in the hall. This is the same room you stood in after your husband rode away, when smoke clung to the rafters and people turned toward you with questions. It feels different now. Not dramatically. Nothing here has transformed into some grand court. The oak tables are still scarred. The stone floor is still cold beneath the rushes. A draught still finds its way beneath the western door with irritating precision. Yet you know the room better. You know which servant quietly checks the hearth before dawn. You know which bench wobbles unless its peg is tightened. You know how much beeswax a long evening consumes. You know where the clerk leaves his quills when he cannot find them. and you know that authority often looks less like commanding and more like remembering. The keys rest at your waist. They no longer feel heavy. Or perhaps you've simply grown used to their weight. You walk toward the storeroom. Inside, the grain stands lower than when your husband left. Of course it does. Bread has been baked. Pottage has simmered. Guests have eaten. Servants have worked. Alms have been given. Ale has been poured. Nothing remaining is exactly as it was. That is not failure. That is a household living. You check the barrels. You glance at the smoked fish. The dog appears at the doorway with renewed optimism. You close the door. Some things have not changed at all. From the storeroom you move toward the account chamber. The clerk sits beside a beeswax candle, arranging parchment into careful bundles. The figures now tell a story of your husband's absence. Repairs, market tolls, wages, delayed rents, grain received, salt purchased, iron bought, hospitality offered, alms given, the carpenter's work, the miller's disputed measure, the tenant allowed to repay part of a debt in labour. Nothing written there looks dramatic, yet every mark records a decision. You remember how uncertain the first evening felt, when coins, tally sticks, and promises seemed to spread across the table faster than you could gather them. Now you recognize the pattern. A household survives through hundreds of small exchanges, some fair, some irritating, some generous, some necessary. You leave the clerk and cross into the courtyard. The carpenter is checking one final hinge. A stable boy sweeps damp straw from the yard. The grey mare stamps beside the trough. Beyond the wall, fields lie under a thin skin of frost. You think of the widow Agnes. She still has her meadow. The tenant with the broken plough has his repaired beam. The boundary oak still stands, minus one illegally optimistic branch. The north pasture fence is stronger now. The ditch drains properly. The lame ewe has improved. These things remain even after the arguments surrounding them have faded. So do relationships. That surprises you more. The widow who brought back the borrowed bowl now stops at the manor without ceremony. The laundress knows she may ask for old linen when someone in the village needs bandages. The cook has promised onions to a neighbouring household. The maid whose fever worried you is back on her feet, moving more slowly but smiling when you pass. The stable hand's finger remains stiff, though he continues to insist the black dog remedy would have worked faster. The dog hears this and leaves the room. Wise creature. You continue toward the gatehouse. There, the gatekeeper tells you that 2 merchants arrived from the west at dawn. They saw riders on the road. Not close, not clearly, but moving in this direction. Your husband may arrive before sunset. You nod. The news travels immediately. Of course it does. Within minutes, the kitchen is louder. A groom checks the stable twice. A maid straightens linen that was already straight. The steward suddenly discovers 3 tasks that could have been done yesterday, but now require urgent attention. You do not interfere. Waiting makes people restless. You walk beyond the gate instead. Only a short distance. Enough to see the road curve through bare trees. A small roadside shrine stands near the hedge, darkened by weather. Someone has tucked a dried sprig beneath the carving. Some swear that when a traveller returns safely, a household should leave a token at the first shrine he passes, thanking the saint believed to have watched the road. Others say a candle should be lit before the traveller crosses the threshold. No one can quite agree whether these customs protect the returning person, bless the household, or simply express relief in a form everyone understands. You decide that relief deserves a candle. When you return, you have one placed near the hall entrance. The flame is small, steady. By afternoon, a few tenants have gathered near the outer yard. Not many, just enough to make it obvious that everyone knows. Agnes stands among them. So does the man whose pig damaged the garden. The pig itself is absent. Perhaps under legal advice. You climb the few steps beside the gatehouse and look outward. For weeks, your husband's absence has stretched across everything. The missing place at supper, the unopened letters, the accounts, the prayers, the rumours, the roads. Yet during that absence, the manor has not merely endured, it has changed. Not in ways that will make songs. No bard will praise the repaired ditch. No illuminated manuscript will devote a golden border to carefully rationed salt. But decisions have accumulated like layers of wax down the side of a candle. You have settled disputes, spent money, saved money, listened to gossip, ignored some of it, trusted people, doubted others, fed strangers, helped the sick, kept religious obligations, made agreements that may still matter years from now. And people have learned that when they come to the hall with a problem, you will hear it. That may be the deepest change of all. Authority once exercised leaves a memory. The monastery bell begins to sound. One note, then another. The dog suddenly lifts his head. You hear nothing at first. Then, faintly, beyond the bare trees, hoofbeats. Several horses. Slow. Approaching. People in the yard become still. You place one hand over the iron keys at your waist. The rosemary above the hall door moves gently in the wind. Whatever comes through that gate, the household your husband left is not quite the household he returns to. And neither are you. The hoofbeats grow louder. For several breaths, nobody moves. Then the first rider appears around the bend beneath the bare trees, his horse dark with road mud. Another follows, then a pack horse, then, at last, the familiar figure you have imagined on every distant road since the morning he left. Your husband is home. The gate opens. Cold air rolls into the courtyard as the riders pass beneath the timber arch. Horses snort and stamp, their breath rising white around torchlight. Cloaks are stained with travel. Boots are crusted brown. Saddlebags sag heavily against tired mounts. There are no trumpets. No banners unfurl dramatically over the walls. One horse immediately tries to drink from a puddle. The homecoming is perfect. You walk down into the yard. Your husband dismounts stiffly and stands before you for a moment, as though both of you are quietly measuring the weeks that have passed. Then the household begins moving again. Grooms take bridles. Servants lift baggage. The steward steps forward. The dog circles everyone in complete confusion before finally recognizing the returning master and exploding into such enthusiastic tail-wagging that his entire body seems poorly assembled. You allow yourself to smile. Your husband looks toward the hall. Fresh rushes lie beyond the doorway. Rosemary hangs overhead. A candle burns beside the entrance. Some swear that a safe traveller should cross his threshold beneath evergreen or fragrant herb so that the luck of the road remains outside while the blessing of home draws him inward. No one can quite agree whether rosemary truly accomplishes this. Tonight nobody removes it. You enter the hall together. Warmth surrounds you. Smoke gathers beneath the rafters. Beeswax candles glow along the tables. Wet wool begins steaming almost immediately near the hearth. The cook has judged the timing correctly. This may be his greatest triumph. Bread comes from the oven. A bird roasts near the fire. Thick pottage simmers with onions, peas, herbs, and small pieces of meat, cheese, smoked fish, and coarse loaves fill the lower tables. Ale is poured. Your husband sits near the hearth while servants bring warm water for his hands. Travel news arrives first. The bridge was worse than expected. One road had flooded. He spent an uncomfortable night at a religious house where the guest chamber apparently possessed enough draughts to qualify as an outdoor structure. You mention nothing about medieval travel brochures. You have already learned that lesson. He asks about the manor. You could answer in one sentence. All is well. Instead, you begin slowly. The north pasture fence is repaired. One ditch has been cleared. The tenant's plough beam has been mended in exchange for later labour. The miller's grain matter remains mostly resolved. Agnes keeps her meadow under established custom. The roof has new work. Salt and iron were purchased at market. Guests were received. One maid suffered fever but recovered. The southern road rumours proved exaggerated. He listens. At first, he asked questions. Then fewer. Not because he loses interest. Because each answer reveals that another problem has already been handled. After supper, the clerk brings the accounts. You place the iron key into the coffer lock yourself. The lid opens. Parchments emerge. Tally sticks. Coins. Receipts. Notes of rents and expenses. Your husband studies them by candlelight. You sit beside him. There is no need to apologize for each expenditure. You know what every payment accomplished. Roofing timber protected the hall. Iron repaired hinges. Salt preserved food. Wages paid labour. Delayed rent kept one tenant household functioning. Hospitality maintained relationships. Alms fulfilled obligations. He reaches the entry concerning 3 hens received against a debt. He looks at you. You look at the clerk. The clerk studies the candle. Some financial mysteries deserve to survive. The accounts are eventually closed. The coffer locks again. For the first time in weeks, the key at your waist feels different. Not lighter, just shared. The following day, life does not suddenly transform. That is perhaps the most revealing thing. The household continues. Bread still needs baking. Firewood still needs carrying. The stable still smells of hay and leather. A tenant still arrives with a complaint before midday. This one concerns a missing goose. Your husband hears the matter. You remain nearby. The goose is eventually discovered behind the brewhouse. Justice is swift. The manor survives. Yet small changes linger. Servants still bring certain questions to you. The steward still asks your judgment about stores. The cook still tells you when salt is running low. Agnes still nods toward you when she crosses the yard. The laundress still knows she can ask for worn linen. The clerk still places account summaries where you can see them. Authority does not vanish simply because another rider returns through the gate. Habits have formed. People remember. You remember too. You remember the first morning when the keys felt unexpectedly heavy. The grain bins. The muddy fields. The broken plough. The boundary oak. The market scales. The expensive pepper. The messenger carrying your letter beneath waxed cloth. The feverish maid. The doubtful relic. The unexpected guests. The rumour of armed men that became an army before shrinking back into ordinary travellers. The rosemary tied above the doorway. All of these things have become part of the household's memory. Your husband's absence did not leave you waiting beside a window. There was scarcely time for that. You worked. Like countless medieval women of different ranks and circumstances, You stepped into the space necessity created. Some women manage large estates. Others keep shops. Others brew ale, tend animals, cultivate strips of land, supervise servants, collect rents, negotiate debts, maintain workshops, raise children, care for the sick, preserve food, and keep households alive through long absences. A husband away at war, court, pilgrimage, trade, or distant work does not cause ordinary life to stop. The fire must still be fed, and someone feeds it. Even now, it is hard to tell how many quiet decisions made by women disappear from surviving records because nobody considered ordinary competence worth writing down. A repaired fence rarely enters a chronicle. A winter storehouse successfully managed does not become legend. No monk illuminates the heroic preservation of onions. Perhaps he should. Night settles again over the manor. Outside, frost gathers on the roof. Inside, supper ends. The trestle tables are cleared. The dog occupies his familiar place near the hearth. Your husband sits across from you, warm and safely home. And the household returns to its slow, familiar rhythm. Yet beneath that familiarity lies something newly understood. For all the stories medieval history tells about kings, knights, warfare, castles, and distant campaigns, much of life survives because people remain behind. They count, repair, feed, negotiate, heal, pray, wait, and continue. The fire settles lower now, and the edges of the hall soften into shadow. The voices around you grow quieter. One servant carries away the final wooden cup. Another draws the shutters closed against the winter wind. Somewhere in the stable, a horse shifts gently in fresh straw, and far beyond the walls the monastery bell sounds once into the darkness. You no longer need to listen for hoofbeats. The road has returned what it carried away. You loosen the keys from your belt and place them beside you on the oak table. The iron is dull beneath the candlelight. They look like ordinary objects again. Perhaps they always were. The last candle burns with a small, steady flame. You draw a wool blanket around your shoulders and sit beside the hearth while the household settles. There is nothing left to solve tonight. The grain is dry. The doors are barred. The animals are sheltered. The sick are recovering. The accounts are closed. Outside, frost slowly whitens the muddy tracks where horses entered only hours ago. The world beyond the walls becomes still. Roadside shrines stand beneath bare branches. Market stalls are empty. Pilgrims sleep beneath monastery roofs. Watchfires glow faintly on distant walls. And somewhere, another household waits for another traveller while another woman checks a lock, covers a sleeping child, stirs the embers, or listens to the wind against an oak door. You let your eyes rest on the fire. Its light becomes softer, slower. The rafters disappear into darkness above you. Smoke curls almost invisibly toward the roof. There is warmth near your hands and quiet around your shoulders, and for once there is no messenger at the gate, no argument waiting beside the table, no uncertain road demanding attention, only the gentle crackle of wood, a distant bell, the sleepy breathing of the manor. You have walked through frost, mud, candlelight, illness, rumour, work, prayer, waiting, and return. Now everything can grow quiet. The medieval night closes gently around the stone walls. The last flame bends. The bell fades. And you can simply rest.